Imagine working 3 to 4 hours a day, spending the rest of your time resting, socializing, making art, and doing basically whatever you felt like. No commute, no inbox, no quarterly reviews. Now imagine that this was just normal life for most of human history. It was. And somehow, we gave it up. Here is what ancient humans actually did all day, and why the answer is more uncomfortable than you might expect. Let's start with a number. Anthropologists who have studied modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups living today in ways similar to our ancient ancestors, have consistently found that these people work somewhere between 3 and 5 hours a day to meet all their basic needs. Food, shelter, water, done. The rest of the day is theirs. Marshall Solins, an anthropologist who studied this in the 1960s, called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society. Not because they had a lot of stuff, they had almost none, but because they had something rarer: time. Think about what a typical day might have looked like for a small band of humans living maybe 30,000 years ago, somewhere in what is now Europe. A group of about 20 to 30 people, moving seasonally, following animals and plants. In the morning, a few people head out to gather berries, roots, and nuts. A couple of the better hunters trail a deer herd. By early afternoon, they are back. Food is shared. Someone naps. Someone else is carving a small bone figurine. A few people are just talking, which, when you think about it, is exactly what most of us are also doing during our afternoon meetings. Children play unsupervised in ways that would give a modern parent a mild heart attack. Elders tell stories, the fire gets tended. That is a full day, not a lazy day, by their standards. A complete one. But here is where it gets interesting. This was not a paradise. Ancient life was genuinely hard in ways that had nothing to do with how many hours you clocked. Child mortality was brutal. Injuries that are trivial today, a bad tooth, an infected cut, could kill you. Famine was always one bad season away. Life expectancy was low, though mostly because of those early deaths dragging down the average. If you made it past childhood, you could live into your 50s or 60s. Still, a bad winter was not just a bad winter, it was potentially a final one. So the leisure was real, but the stakes were also real. They were not lounging on hammocks without a care. They were resting because rest was smart. If you did not need to spend more energy than you had, you did not. Every calorie mattered. Efficiency was survival. The laziness was actually genius. Now here's the part that should make you stop and think. Around 12,000 years ago, something changed. Humans started farming. They began deliberately planting crops and raising animals instead of following them. And almost immediately, life got harder, not easier, harder. We know this from skeletons. Yes, skeletons. Bones are surprisingly chatty about the lives their owners lived. When archaeologists compare pre-agricultural skeletons to early farming skeletons from the same regions, the farmers are shorter. Their bones show more signs of disease, repetitive stress injuries, and nutritional deficiency. Early farmers had worse teeth, more infections, and shorter lives, on average, than the hunter-gatherers who came before them. They also worked significantly more hours. Instead of 3 to 5 hours of varied activity, early farmers were grinding grain, tending crops, digging irrigation, and hauling water for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. The same repetitive motions, every day, for their entire lives. Their joints knew it, their skeletons remembered it. So why did they do it? Why would anyone look at the farming life and choose it? This is the uncomfortable twist at the center of human history. Farming was not chosen because it was better for the individual. It was chosen, or more accurately stumbled into, because it could support more people. A farmed piece of land can feed many more humans per square mile than a hunted one. So populations grew. And once populations grew, you could not go back. There were too many mouths to feed the old way. Agriculture was less a brilliant invention and more a demographic trap that humanity fell into, probably gradually and probably without fully realizing what was happening. By the time anyone could have objected, there were already too many people for the old system to support. The slow replacement was complete. Farming had won. Not because it was better, but because it was more. More food per acre, more people per valley, more complexity, more hierarchy, more stuff, and eventually, more jobs. This is the climax of the whole story. The transition from forager to farmer is one of the most consequential shifts in human history, and by most individual well-being measures, it made the average person worse off. We traded leisure and variety for productivity and scale, and 10,000 years later, we are still living inside that trade. Now, here is what to do with that information. First, stop feeling guilty about wanting to rest. Your body is not broken because it wants downtime. It is ancient. It is running software written over hundreds of thousands of years that says, rest when you can, because tomorrow is unpredictable. The drive to rest is not laziness. It is deeply, deeply old. Second, understand that busyness is not the same as meaning. Hunter-gatherers were not bored during their leisure hours. They were social, creative, and spiritually active. Cave paintings, bone flutes, carved figurines, these were not made by people who had accidentally freed up an afternoon. They were made by people who had time and chose to do something with it that had no survival value whatsoever except being human. Third, the story of ancient humans is not a story about primitive people waiting to be civilized. It is a story about a remarkably adaptable species that found workable solutions to survival across wildly different environments, from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests, and mostly did so with more grace and less panic than we manage on a Tuesday. There is something worth sitting with in that. We have built a world of extraordinary complexity and comfort. We can cure the infections that killed ancient people outright. We have warm buildings and global supply chains and dentists. Dentists, the unsung heroes of civilized life. But we also work longer hours than nearly any foraging society ever did. We sleep less. We report higher rates of stress and loneliness. We have more options than any human who ever lived, and somehow feel like we have less time. That tension is not a coincidence. It is the 10,000-year echo of a trade we made without fully voting on it. Ancient humans were not waiting to be us. In some ways, they had already figured out something we are still struggling to name. The goal was never to do more. It was to do enough, and then live the rest. If that idea landed somewhere useful, consider subscribing. New videos drop regularly, and apparently, this channel is how your algorithm says it is time to rest.